Hey guys, Aaron Cybertron Zhang here, and today I'm back with another episode of Road to Ranked, where I climb the online series 2 VGC ladder in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and provide live commentary as I go. In this video, I will be featuring the team that won the Vancouver Regional Championships, which took place in the middle of March. The team was built by a player called Nails, who finished in the top 4 of Knoxville Regionals with this team, and it was piloted by Abdullah Mohayyuddin, who ended up winning the entire tournament. The team has some really cool components to it, like Torkoal and Lilligant, which I feel like has been very underrated before this team was created, as well as things like Fluttermane, Great Tusk, Multiscale Dragonite, and King Gambit. As always, I'll do a quick breakdown of the team, but if you want to just skip to the battles, check out the timestamps down in the description below. And thanks so much as always for joining me. If you enjoyed, really appreciate it if you consider leaving a like in the video or subscribing to the channel, especially as we get close to 200k subscribers, which is really, really wild to me. So yeah, thanks for joining me, and let's dive into things. First of all, just some quick context and background about the tournament. The Vancouver Regional Championships took place in the middle of March 2023 and used the Series B rule set, which allows for Paradox Pokemon. There were over 300 players in the Masters division. There were 9 rounds of Swiss in day 1, 5 rounds of Swiss in day 2, and a top 8 single elimination bracket. The top 32 players from day 1 moved on to day 2. The top 8 players from day 2 moved on to the final bracket, and then the final bracket obviously played out. Now, Abdullah ended up going undefeated in day 1 with 9 wins and 0 losses, and in the second day of Swiss, he went 3 wins, 2 losses to be the first seed going into the top 8. Along his way, Abdullah and I actually competed in the first round of Swiss in day 2, which was really, really exciting. This was my first Scarlet and Violet tournament in person. You know, I commentated a couple of the regional championships and obviously been making a lot of content in the last couple of months, but I wanted to go back out and play and finish in the top 4, which I feel very, very grateful for. Although I will say, coming so close to winning another regional championship, and you know, I haven't won a regional since 2017. I felt like I was like, I'm just right there, you know, and I felt like I was good enough to be champion of the entire tournament, but in the end, I bowed out in the top 4 to Ryan, who was an incredible player and very cleanly outplayed me, harder than anyone else had actually, I think, in the event in the first game that we had together. And so in the end, Abdullah, you know, very deserving of winning the title. And I want to just briefly talk about him because I was so impressed by him. He was incredibly mature, understood the game really, really well, and also stayed incredibly composed, right? He had like this kind of humility to him, but also this confidence to him that I was just amazed by. And specifically in our set, I thought my team actually matched up against his team fairly well. But he not only brought the right Pokemon in all of the 3 games, he also adjusted every time with his leads as well as his turn 1 play. And that's something that I think is not very easy or intuitive to do, even for veteran players. Not only that, in game 3, he made the absolute right prediction on turn 1 and actually ended up missing a Rock Slide on my Talonflame. He went Extreme Speed and Rock Slide with Dragonite and Tusk to just try to KO Talonflame before I could set up Tailwind. I led Talonflame Tusk, protected Tusk. I honestly did not realize he had Rock Slide on the team sheet, so I protected Tusk, saw the Extreme Speed come out, and took a big gulp. Rock Slide ended up missing the Talonflame, and so I ended up gaining a huge advantage because not only did he miss, I also set up Tailwind and I had Will-O-Wisp pressure going into the next turn. Despite that, Abdullah did not tilt, played perfectly, and still won the set. The fact that this was his first tournament and he had that kind of composure in a game 3 situation was absolutely incredible. I know he also watches some of my content, which I'm so grateful for. And so in the end, you know, that's like one of the most rewarding things to me as a creator. I started making content because I just wanted to share my knowledge and love of the game with other people. And if you could, you know, if I could be a part of people's journeys as they become champions of these events, especially their first time competing in VGC, then that means the world to me. So even though I would have loved to win the Vancouver Regional Championships, I'm really, really grateful that Abdullah was able to take home the crown at the end of the day. This guy is just absolutely amazing at the game, and he's someone that you're going to have to keep an eye out for in the future. So really glad that I got to battle him. I'll talk a bit more about my experience in a future video, but yeah, thanks to all of those who cheered for me throughout the weekend. Finishing top 4 definitely felt surreal, and yeah, it felt very clearly to me that Abdullah was just the best player in that tournament, and you know, he defeated so many of the players in the top 8 along his way to the championship as well. So a huge congrats to him. Let's break down the team. First of all, some quick context about this team. Like I mentioned, it was initially built by a player called Nails, aka Nick, who finished in the top 4 of Knoxville Regionals with this composition. Now, Nick did a really good job identifying kind of a hole in the metagame, and that was that a lot of teams were actually just really weak to Torkoal Lilligant. Torkoal Lilligant historically in VGC, it was actually very good way back in 2017, performing incredibly well in the beginning of the season in Sun and Moon, and I feel like it was just kind of underplayed in the beginning of Scarlet and Violet, honestly. And so with Paradox Pokemon being introduced, Torkoal's value, you know, kind of skyrocketed because of course you can set up the Sun to activate Photosynthesis for Paradox Pokemon. And so this team was basically like, okay, well, one, a lot of teams are just really weak to Torkoal and Lilligant, but two, you know, you also have to respect that duo. I don't necessarily always have to bring it, and I can surround Pokemon can let, you know, basically match up really well against things that otherwise do well into Torkoal plus Lilligant. And the idea is that this lead is just super, super oppressive, right? You have After You plus Eruption. That's really powerful. You can go for Protect plus Sleep Powder as well. With Terra being a thing as well, now you can go for Ghost Terra to avoid Fake Outs on turn 1. And if you Sleep Powder something that's clicking Fake Out onto you and make that Pokemon completely useless, it puts your opponent in a really tough spot. And so, yeah, the idea is, hey, Torkoal Lilligant's really good into a lot of meta teams. Nick actually eliminated Wolf from Knoxville Regionals in top 8, and, you know, Wolf was kind of saying, I just don't really have a good matchup into this because it's not something I prepared for in practice. And so, after Knoxville Regionals, it was kind of on people's radars, but I feel like people didn't really, like, include too much counterplay to this team anyway, and so I wasn't surprised to see it win the entire tournament. But, yeah, Torkoal Lilligant is back and finally has claimed a regional championship in this season. And so, yeah, like I said, the general idea behind Torkoal Lilligant is to go for those After You eruptions, but Lilligant, don't discount the amount of offense this Pokemon can do. It's base 110 special attack, and there are a fair amount of Pokemon in the format that are actually quite weak to Lilligant, including Iron Bundle. One huge thing about Lilligant is that it will outspeed Booster Energy Iron Bundle when you're in the sun. And so you can actually just get a one-hit knockout onto Iron Bundle, which is really nice. If your opponent kind of misleads Iron Bundle and you just go with Torkoal Lilligant immediately, Lilligant will put on an immense amount of pressure onto the bundle, often forcing the bundle to consider protecting, but then Lilligant could just like Sleep Powder whatever is next to it. It's really hard to deal with a combination of plays such as Protect, Sleep Powder, After You Eruption, as well as Sleep Powder and just attacking with Torkoal, right? And so that's one of the things that makes this duo so strong. Torkoal is fairly straightforward here. It is just Charcoal, Eruption, Flamethrower, Earth Power, and Protect, and you have Min Speed here, which you can utilize against Trick Room teams as well to your advantage. To round out the team, you've got 2 Paradox Pokemon in the Fluttermane as well as the Great Tusk. Fluttermane here is, you know, a little bit defensive with 84 defense EVs. One of the nice things, by the way, is that Palafin, of course, is fairly common in Series 2, but with the Sun from Torkoal, you actually reduce the amount of damage that Palafin can do with its Jet Punch and Wave Crashes, which is really nice for Fluttermane here. It's a Fairy Terra, and this Fluttermane spread is definitely a little bit more offensive than some of the other Choice Specs Fluttermanes you have seen. Actually, when I was preparing for this tournament, I very intentionally wanted to make sure I outsped this Fluttermane, and so I had like just a little bit more speed investment, but this is generally almost as high as you'll see for a lot of Specs Fluttermanes. Otherwise, the benchmark will be outspeeding like max speed Talonflame, for example. But obviously, the more you invest in special attack and speed, the more you have to compromise for your defenses. But this is just very offensive. Fairy Terra here to deal even more damage with Dazzling Gleam and Moonblast. Scarf Great Tusk is the other mon on this team that's really interesting, right? Because it's got Steel Terra, and so a lot of people have used Ground Terra on Great Tusk just to maximize damage, but Steel Terra is really nice defensively and can help out against a fair amount of attacks that otherwise give you trouble, primarily Fairy and Psychic type attacks, for example. And so, yeah, the idea behind Scarf Great Tusk is it combos really nicely with Dragonite, and it's a nightmare to go up against when you have Torkoal activating Drought to activate Photosynthesis as well, right? Because suddenly it's like, oh, this Pokemon has a Photosynthesis boost and it's fast. How do I really deal with it accordingly? And it synergizes really nicely with Dragonite in particular because you can just go for like Earthquakes next to this. Dragonite is one of the next Pokemon here, and this Pokemon actually gave me a ton of trouble when I was fighting against it. I have to say, I think before using this team or going up against it, I didn't really see how good like multi-scale Lum Dragonite was. Then I fought against this team and I was like, it's a nightmare to face against because it has so much bulk with 180 HP EVs. It's really difficult to knock out, especially with Flying Terra and multi-scale as well, because like you're often forced to break to multi-scale, then try to launch a super effective attack into it, but it's not actually that easy. This set is just really good utility-wise. Ice Spinner, incredible into Indity plus Armouries to get rid of terrain, also just good until a Pokemon that are weak against it. Terra Blast plus Flying Terra is just an incredibly powerful attack in general, and Extreme Speed is really valuable in finishing things off. With the Lum Berry, you also match up so much better against things like Talonflame, Amoonguss, Brute Bonnet, opposing Lilligants, for example, and that was one of the big problems for me. I had Brute Bonnet on my team, but it felt really useless, especially because I just couldn't do anything against Dragonite with it since it had the Lum Berry. So it's interesting to see multi-scale kind of pop up more as an ability, but it makes sense, right? You don't really need Inner Focus as much with Protect. There's no need to kind of avoid those flinches as much, and even though opposing Intimidates can be scary, you actually have King Gambit to potentially soak up those Intimidates, right? Thanks to Defiant, you actually often want your opponent to bring Intimidate. If King Gambit can get a Defiant boost, it can obviously really go from there. King Gambit here is a Assault Vest set. The main thing to call out is, like, unlike a Terra such as Flying, it's actually got Fire Terra. And part of the cool thing about Fire Terra is that it combos really nicely with Torkoal, right? You can switch Torkoal in, Fire Terra, go for Terra Blast and just deal huge amounts of damage to Pokemon that are weak to fire type attacks. And so it gives you kind of a new means of coverage that your opponents generally wouldn't expect. Obviously, the downside with using Fire Terra is you are still weak to ground type attacks, and it opens a new set of weaknesses such as to water and rock. But overall, Fire Terra really nice in terms of pure damage and synergizes really nicely with Torkoal. So there are a lot of different ways you can play with the team. Torkoal Lilligant as the lead is always kind of one of the go-tos. You should ask yourself, does my opponent have an appropriate response to it? Because if not, then you should just lead it. Other responses include, or other leads include, like Dragonite plus either Kingambit, Dragonite plus Tusk. Those were the leads that Abdullah brought against me when I had played against him, and they were really strong. I think Flutter plus, Tusk obviously applies a ton of offensive pressure immediately. There's some interesting leads where you can go with like Lilligant, but not lead Torkoal immediately, especially if your opponent has Weather. For example, Lilligant plus Tusk, Lilligant plus Flutter, and then you can like switch in Torkoal on turn 1 to pressure with Sleep Powder, but not immediately go for it. Lilligant, by the way, still bringable even without Torkoal because it's just got decent base speed, and with Focus Sash and Sleep Powder, that's always a strong combination as well. So yeah, a lot of different ways that you can utilize the team. Honestly, I would recommend just watching Nick and Abdullah throughout Knoxville and Vancouver regionals to see how the Masters really piloted, because of course, they understand the team better than really anyone else, but those are just some of the things that I've noticed while using the team and playing against it. So yeah, let's quickly highlight some weaknesses. So the first thing I want to call out is that when you're using Lilligant, you will miss your moves a fair amount of the time. Leaf Storm and Sleep Powder are just not exactly the highest accuracy of moves, and Lilligant's not exactly the bulkiest Pokemon either, so a single miss can, occasionally cost you the game. Now, that in itself doesn't mean that it's a weakness for the team, it just means that you have to accept that when playing with this team. And I think Pokemon selection with this team is incredibly important. For example, I think that if Abdullah had brought Torkoal and Lilligant against me, especially given that I had like an Assault Vest Excalibur on my team, I would have had a huge advantage against him. What he did really well was identify, this is not the matchup for Torkoal Lilligant, I am just not going to bring it, right? Because against bad matchups with Torkoal and Lilligant, you will often feel a little bit more tempted to just click that Sleep Powder, but if you, miss, you can just be in a huge hole immediately. So Pokemon selection with this team, I feel like in particular is really important, and I think one of the things about Torkoal and Lilligant is that it often baits players into just leading it all the time, but there are plenty of things in the format that actually match up pretty well against it, and so one key skill when using this team is identifying when to bring Torkoal Lilligant and when not to bring it at all. And another key skill is just not tilting after you miss, because you are going to miss fairly frequently when you use this Pokemon. So keep that in mind. In terms of actual things that can counter Torkoal and Lilligant, I think the first thing is like a Grass Terra Pokemon that also has Flash Fire. So Armarouge, for example, is interesting because it can Grass Terra, it will be immune to the Sleep Powder, and then Torkoal can't really do that much with its attacks into it either. That's kind of why the rest of the team exists, right? Against Armarouge Entity, like Dragonite can Ice Spinner, you can pressure with a lot of damage from all of these Pokemon as well. But if you're looking for a definitive counter to Torkoal and Lilligant, something like that, or Surledge, for example, is really interesting. Tyranitar, I think, is probably one of the tougher Pokemon to go up against, mainly because it breaks Focus Sash on Lilligant, it gets rid of the Sun, which is obviously not great for Torkoal or the Pokemon that want to activate the photosynthesis from it, and it also breaks the multi-scale from Dragonite. That being said, this team has a ton of offense into Tyranitar. You've got obviously Great Tusk for it, and even if it goes for Flying Terror, you've got super effective Rock Slide or Ice Spinner for it. So it's not like Tyranitar just single-handedly beats the team, but it can make things a little bit more difficult for the team, right? And so that's one thing to keep in mind as well. I think Intimidate is also fairly scary for the Dragonite and the Great Tusk. You obviously do have Kingambit with Fire Terra, and so like that can be a response into Arcanine, but let's say like you don't bring Kingambit or you don't position it correctly, and Arcanine's able to get free Intimidates or Snarls off with Safety Goggles. That can be pretty scary. I think Grass Terra and Goggles in general, by the way, obviously will give Lilligant some trouble because it just can't, go for Sleep Powder nearly as easily as well. And one thing to note here is that you don't have Protect on the Flutter Mane, on the Tusk, or the Kingambit, and so you can potentially leverage that to your advantage. I think one thing that I was trying to take advantage of when I was playing against this team in regionals was saying, okay, you know what, like you only have one Pokemon that actually is immune to ground type attacks, and so I was trying to lead Great Tusk and pressuring like Kingambit immediately on turn 1, and one adjustment Abdullah really did a great job of recognizing was saying, okay, I'm not going to lead Kingambit anymore because it's so weak to Great Tusk and I don't have a good switch into it. Let me lead my Great Tusk instead because it's I can at least take Headlong Rush a little bit better. But yeah, I think Pokemon selection for this team in particular is really important, and Torkoal Lilligant can often be, I think, a bait, especially for newer players where you kind of just think you can lead it all the time, but the reality is that it's not just a Torkoal Lilligant team. Like the rest of the components are really important as well. One key skill is also being able to identify when you can bring this in the back rather than leading it and trying to clean up games with it. So yeah, anyway, those are a couple of things that I've noted while trying out the team. Let's finally get into the games. Rotom Fan, whoa, okay. Arcanine, Rotom, Hydreigon, Palafin. Tusk and the Mouse Hold. So if I were my opponent and I were trying to beat Torkoal Lilligant, I would bring Hydreigon, Palafin, and Arcanine because they all resist fire. That being said, Torkoal still does a lot of damage to all of them. The other thing is if they bring Arcanine, King Gambit can potentially capitalize off that with the Defiant. It's one of the things that makes this team really strong. Tusk also is a pretty appropriate response into Arcanine. Dragonite I don't think is that good here, although it is pretty valuable into their Tusk specifically. I think here I'm just going to lead Torkoal Lilligant first and see what their best response is. Although, like, I'm thinking about leading King Gambit because they might lead Arcanine immediately. And if we catch them and get Defiant, I think that would be huge. So I might actually try to end the game with Torkoal Lilligant rather than start with it. Because they do have decent answers into Torkoal Lilligant early on. I'm actually thinking Flutter plus Gambit with Torkoal Lilligant in the back. Basically, the idea is that the Flutter is really good into the Hydreigon. The Gambit's really good into the Arcanine. Palafin's a little bit scary because, of course, they could just, like, Jet Punch. But before you transform, it's not that scary. And we have Torkoal to set up the Sun for Flutter as well to take less damage from the Water-type attacks. It's going to be Mouse and Arcanine. Okay. Yeah, this is exactly the logic in leading King Gambit here. It immediately activates Defiant. It's beat up. Oh. That is cute. Okay. So beat up Mouse Hold with Justified Arcanine is what we're running into here. So turn 1, I could try to double up onto Mouse immediately. I honestly don't hate going for Sucker Punch on an Arcanine. And Power Gemming it, honestly. I don't think this KOs, but it's fine because if they Flare Blitz, they're just going to end up fainting. Oh, or we can just KO it. Cool. Nice. Yeah, so if you don't see Intimidate from Arcanine, it's normally Justified. That puts my opponent in a really tough spot, I think. Tusk comes out. If we break Sash on Tusk, Lilligant Torkoal should just clear this endgame at this point already, honestly. But obviously they could go for Follow Me with Mousehold right now. I think I should probably switch Flutter Mane out right now. Into Lilligant. And I went for Kowtow Cleave here onto the Tusk because maybe they like Headlong Rush into the Lilligant slot, for example. Follow Me obviously makes sense. Maybe they haven't deduced them Choice Specs, but I don't know. With Power Gem getting that one hit knockout, I feel like they should, yeah, know that. So Lilligant indeed just goes for Follow Me. Fine by me. And it's Headlong Rush into the Lilligant slot. Perfect. Okay. Now we get Kowtow Cleave into Mousehold. Amazing damage there. If I were Flying Terra again, but I'd probably just go for Flying Terra here. But since we're Fire, we don't get that much value out of it. What do I want to do here? Like, they could protect Mouse, Earthquake, for example. I'm down to... If they mess up here and let me Sucker Punch Tusk and KO Gambit, I win the game immediately off that, I would say. So I'm down to Sucker Punch and Protect here. Nice. Hydreigon. Rotom. Yeah, you can see, like, Torkoal Lilligant, I think, clears this endgame now. And so I actually want them to KO me with Tusk. Because if they KO me with Tusk, I break Focus Sash potentially on there and I bring out Torkoal. And then it's just after you Eruption to clear the entire team. Steel. Okay, that won't help them against Torkoal, unfortunately. But Steel Tusk is interesting because it is on this team as well, and I feel like that's one adaptation that people weren't using as much on Tusk. Like, a lot of people just go with Ground Terror on it, but Steel obviously helps with some resistances, which is really nice. So, beautiful. They're probably just going for Earthquake. Oh, no, they're actually Headlong Rushing. Okay. That's fine. I think there's a lot of different ways we can clean up this game, I'm happy to just go for the Torkoal Lilligant sweep and sacrifice both Flutter Mane as well as King Gambit right now. Yeah, like at this point, I think we've already built up a big enough lead where it's really tough for my opponent. So Tusk switches out, which I think is pretty interesting. Back out into Mouse Hold. That's the pressure that Lilligant in itself applies, right? I think my opponent was also maybe trying to cover for me switching into Torkoal and then Lilligant attacking into Tusk, which makes sense, and try to get the knockout onto that slot. Okay, Sucker does minimal damage into Rotom. Nightshade Rotom. Okay, haven't really seen that before. That's pretty cool. With leftovers. Huh. Interesting. Man, I'm honestly just looking for the free switching into Lilligant and Torkoal. What are their odds they, like, double up onto a slot? Who would they target? They probably target Flutter Mane more. Alright, I'm down to switch King Gambit into this slot, Torkoal into this slot. I think at this point, honestly, Flutter Mane and Torkoal just win the game anyway, so I don't necessarily need Torkoal and Lilligant to sweep. That's kind of the awkward thing about bringing it in the back, is, like, if your opponent's not actually KOing you, it's a little bit hard to, like, position them. Because it's like, I needed my opponent to knock out the slot next to the Lilligant, right? And if they did that, the game would have just been immediately over. But yeah, I'm like willing to go for the win right now, because if they don't KO Lilligant this turn, then they're just in really bad shape. Okay, there's Follow Me. It's Will-O-Wisp onto Lilligant, cool. Okay. With that, it's obviously a very supportive Rotom, Nightshade, Will-O-Wisp, which is really interesting. And then Mousehold's also pretty supportive, obviously, with Beat Up. Yeah, honestly, here, I think it's actually fine to just protect Fire Terra Eruption. And then we can finish off. If Mouse faints, right, they bring out Tusk, and then I just after you Eruption. But given that it's supportive Rotom here, like a Thunderbolt really shouldn't do that much. So Lilligant protects. They should follow me here. Okay, Rotom protects. That works. And it's just Taunt. Yeah, that makes sense. So then next turn we just go after your Eruption, and that just wins the game. I think the main thing is my opponent's team, like as soon as you lead Mousehold and Arcanine, it's very clear to me what you're trying to do. So they could have gone for a Follow Me on turn 1, right? But the way I was thinking about it is if you go for Follow Me with Mousehold, yeah, Arcanine gets a Flare Blitz off, but then it takes a ton of recoil damage, right? And if you take a lot of recoil, it puts me in a position where maybe Lilligant and Torkoal, like after you've taken a lot of recoil, can just finish you off after like another big Flare Blitz, for example. So I think one of the interesting things about using this team is when do you bring out Lilligant Torkoal? Do you just lead with it? Do you have it in the back? In this game, I felt like even though my opponent had 3 resistances to the Torkoal, it still felt fairly powerful. So Tusk comes out. It is going to get an attack boost here, but at this point, after your Eruption should clear both of these. So after you, plus Eruption, and that should be GG. Okay, there it is. And Fire boosted Charcoal, Sun, Torkoal Eruption at max HP. Comes out, and that's a double knockout. Perfect. So yeah, I think like one of the things that's really interesting about this team is when your opponents see Lilligant and Torkoal in team preview, it reminds me a lot of like Colossal, for example, in the previous generation, where it's super, super oppressive. And so your opponents often will have to lead in a way just to counter it, because if you do not respect Lilligant Torkoal, you can lose the game so quickly, right? So it's like your lead has to cover for Lilligant Torkoal, but can it cover for all the other options on this team as well? And often the answer is no, that's really quite difficult. And so in team preview, I was like, okay, what are their answers to Lilligant plus Torkoal? It's leading Palafin and then maybe switching out. It's leading the Hydreigon. It's leading the Arcanine. What's interesting is they ended up not being Intimidate on the Arcanine, because yeah, if Gambit got a Defiant boost, then turn 1 I would probably just Fire Terra that immediately and just start going for knockouts with it. But since they ended up being the justified variant instead, I figured, you know, might as well try to surprise them on turn 1 with Arcanine. Even if they went for Follow Me, I didn't think it would be the end of the world. Flare Blitz would potentially get a knockout onto either of my Pokemon, but they would take a lot of recoil, you know, in response, and so felt like, you know, still definitely okay. But that turn 1 I felt like already gave me a huge advantage, and then getting Lilligant and Torkoal finally out next to each other allowed us to clean up the game with that combination. So yeah, when you use this team, think about bringing it in the back. However, I think this game also highlighted how it can be a little bit awkward to kind of sweep with it in the end game, because I was like, okay, well, if my opponent knocks out King Gambit, they give me the perfect position to bring out the Torkoal, and then I can just go from there. But they did not target the King Gambit slot, and so I was kind of awkwardly left on the field with Lilligant, which wasn't really doing too much, and that's why I kind of made that double switch. But I think there are a lot of different ways to play this end game. One thing to note, though, is because they were actually Steel Terra on the Tusk, Flutter Mane in the late game lost a little bit of value, whereas if they were Ground Terra, for example, we'd be able to do a little bit more, and I could click like Moonblast confidently to finish off Maushold, Tusk, and the Rotom, for example. But yeah, that is the power of late game Torkoal Lilligant. Alright, we're up against Nino Pokebros. They are a group of brothers, and they host a lot of community events and stream a bunch as well, which is really cool. So they've got Hands, Dondozo, Tatsu, Gambit, Flutter, and the Farigiraf. What's their response to Torkoal Lilligant? Also, how do I deal with Dondozo? Be putting it to sleep with Lilligant with Sleep Powder and then like Leaf Storming, and if they defensively Terra using our other Pokemon? It's hard in best of one because I don't know what Terra type the Dondozo is. It could be Grass, it could be Steel, Dragon, right? And knowing the Terra makes it so much easier to play against. So if I were them and I were looking to respond to Torkoal Lilligant as a lead, what can they really do, honestly? I actually think Torkoal Lilligant as a lead is just fairly powerful here. What do I want in the back? Gambit's decent into some of their Mons. I obviously have to respect Trick Room. There's a Trick Room mode with Hands, Farigiraf, Gambit, and Flutter. Should probably bring my own Gambit here, I think. I think we drop Dragonite. The downside is it ends up being like Grass on the Dozo. I think I'm going to go with Flutter as the 4th. Specs Flutter, Moonblast does pretty significant damage into even +2 Dondozo. So we'll see. I think Dondozo is an interesting matchup. I think it's a lot harder in closed team sheet best of 1 than it is in open team sheet tournaments. Mainly because the Terra type alone can dramatically change which 4 Pokemon you want to bring. It's going to be Dozo and Hands. This is actually really interesting immediately because, like, they probably know that Lilligant is Ghost Terra here, so I actually expect them to not click Fake Out until a Lilligant slot. I'm really worried about Grass Terra Dozo or Substitute right now. Like, I could see them going Fake Out onto Torkoal and clicking Substitute on turn 1. I think I'm actually kind of down to just click Sleep Powder onto Dondozo. I could protect Torkoal here. Eruption is also interesting. Okay, I'm actually going to go for Sleep Powder Eruption. Wow, they did just go for Fake Out on a Lilligant. Okay, kind of surprised to see that, just because Ghost Terra there would have been super bad. But yeah, there's the Substitute, what I was expecting. I honestly think this is fine then, if Eruption breaks the sub, which I would expect it to. Looks like AV Iron Hands to me. Nice. Okay, not a bad turn 1. No leftovers, interesting, huh? Oh, if it's Chesto Rest, that's so bad. That would be the absolute nightmare. So right now, I could go after you Fire Terra Eruption. That's one possibility. I'm really worried about this being Chesto Rest, like I mentioned. If I were them, I'd probably switch Hands out into Tatsu right now and just send it with Dondozo. I honestly want to just go for Leaf Storm right now. Leaf Storm Earth Power. Yeah, so hand switches out. See, this is the thing, right? In closed team sheet, like, I just don't know what the Terra is on the Dondozo. But, like, I'm hoping, like, Leaf Storm plus Earth Power does enough where maybe they KO something, but then I bring out Flutter, and then Specs Flutter can just, like, Terra, Fairy, Moonblast KO. But I don't want to click Sleep Powder here because of the risk of, like, Chestoberry as well as Grass Terra on Dondozo. That's probably game over. Oh, man. Okay, I mean, I shouldn't give up, obviously. Oh, okay, the crit makes up for it. Never mind. I think we're okay. Yeah. I'm just gonna leave Storm here. And Earth Power. Man, what a swing of emotions there. I think my sequencing was correct there, though, so I'm happy about how I've approached it. Leaf Storm, just Earth Power as well. Hopefully we don't miss this one. Oh, but this is where they Terra now, right? Yeah. See, that's the frustrating thing, because if the Leaf Storm had hit, it would have done so much damage, where then after... What Terra are you is the other question. Okay, it is Steel Terra. Maybe I should have read the Steel Terra and gone, like, after... You know what? I was going to say Double Protect was the play. I miss again. I'm going to go for Earthquake. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a fairly tricky matchup. Oh, Lilligant actually survives, which is really huge, actually. Okay, nice. I could have Double Protected there to scout out, because then I could have gone after you Flamethrower. So I could have played that more optimally, in my opinion. It's fine. I get Specs Flutter now. Fairly sure a Shadow Ball should KO. How many turns of Sun do I have left? 2. I'm happy to... I guess it's fine to click Sleep Powder here. I'm trying to sequence this properly. Could also go into Gambit. They might, if they have Substitute and Earthquake and Rest, I actually don't think the Dondozo here is going to have Protect. I think I should probably... I mean, yeah, I'm just a little afraid that it actually survives the Spec Shadow Ball, so I'm going to leave Storm here. And Shadow Ball. I should have Double Protected. I just really didn't want them to rest, honestly. Okay, so we get the knockout onto this. Now, if you bring out Iron Hands, I can go Ghost Terra with the Flutter, and then, with the Lilligant and get a Sleep Powder off, potentially. But I'm honestly okay with how I played this, other than that one turn where the Steel Terra came out. Now, what's unfortunate here is, like, I couldn't sequence this to a point where I got the knockout onto Dondozo, and then also got the knockout onto Tatsugiri as it came out. Like, that's how you really want to play, ideally. I think, like, Hands can come out right now. If Hands comes out, I'd maybe be interested in clicking... See, the problem is... I had to lock into Shadow Ball. Although, actually, like, Moonblast, I think, would have knocked out Dondozo since Leaf Storm ended up doing more than I expected. So, yeah. Anyway, like I said, because I didn't know the Terra... Oh, they actually bring out Flutter. That's really interesting. Huh. It's Speed Flutter. Speed Flutter makes me think it's probably Sash. I think I'm down to Sleep Powder the Flutter here, then. See, that's the other thing. I don't know who's Sashed right now between these two. I want to Sleep Powder Flutter, I think, here, and then just Shadow Ball into Tatsugiri. But if it ends up being Sash Tatsu, like Specs Flutter, it's a disaster. And I miss Sleep Powder, too. Oh my gosh. Ugh. Yeah, I mean, this was a game where I feel like almost everything that went wrong. But I think I actually played it decently well. Sometimes you just have to laugh it off, right? Like, I mean, there I think I could have gone for Terra with my Flutter, for example. The problem is they outsped me there, right? And so they would probably... can Gambit actually pull off a comeback right now? If I actually switched in there since they Icy Winded, there was the possibility, but I think now it's too late. But yeah, I mean, that was incredibly frustrating, right? Because if the Sleep Powder connects, Flutter falls asleep, my Flutter survives, Shadow Ball KOs their Tatsugiri. That looked like specs from their end, given that they got that one-hit KO onto me as well. And then so if we get the knockout, then the next turn I can just Terra, Shadow Ball, KO Flutter, and probably win from there. So, yeah. That's the game sometimes. I'm glad to show this game off because using Lilligant can be a little bit high variance sometimes, and I missed 2 Leaf Storms and a Sleep Powder, right? That's the reality that you're going to have to accept when you use that Pokemon. So the most important thing is to kind of reflect and be like, okay, well, you know, am I happy with how I play the game overall? And in this game, honestly, the answer is yes. I think I, like, you know, called the substitute on turn 1, got a lot of damage on the hands. Turn 2, I called that they were going to switch in Tatsugiri, and like, I wanted to respect the Chesto, right? And given that the lack of Protect, and leftovers, I really think it probably was Chesto. So if that Leaf Storm connects immediately, then Leaf Storm plus Earth Power puts me in a really good spot, where then the Dondozo is probably low enough where the next strike can go for After You plus Flamethrower or After You plus Eruption. I do think the main thing to call out here, though, is, yeah, I figured that, like, I didn't respect the Terra that much, the turn when it actually finally ended up coming out from Dondozo, and I had the opportunity to go for After You plus, like, Eruption there immediately. I just wasn't sure it was going to KO Dondozo from that range. And then I also could have gone for Terra here in this endgame with the Flutter Mane to survive the Shadow Ball, although I actually don't think that really would have made too much of a difference. Yeah, because the reality is, like, their Shadow Ball should still be a 2-hit knockout onto my end, and with me missing... Oh, actually... No, because Sun was expiring, yeah, so I would have been in a difficult spot anyway. I think, like, even if I had gone for Fairy Terra there with my Flutter and one-shot, like, presumably what was Scarf Tatsugiri, yeah, then, like, Lilligant survives the turn, but then the next turn they can Shadow... I actually, no, yeah, I do think it was probably still correct to at least go for the Terra, because I had, like, no endgame at that point, right? And there was... What was the incentive to not go for Terra there? Was to conserve Terra for Lilligant so that I could bypass a Fake Out, which I actually think is decent value. But yeah. So that being said, yeah, I got pretty unlucky, like missed 2 Leaf Storms and the Sleep Powder, but I had 2 turns where I could have played better as well. So that's just how the game is sometimes. But like I said, if you're using Lilligant, the variance with it can be pretty high. And so just keep that in mind, right? Because like Leaf Storm and Sleep Powder are both moves I can miss, but that was pretty wild RNG. Okay, Roaring Moon, Arcanine, Amoonguss, Palafine, Golden Gull, and the Iron Hands. Kind of down to just lead Torkoal Lilligant here. I think one thing to worry about is like Water Terra, Nasty Plot, Golden Go. But I honestly think this is just pretty strong as is. Palafin's probably what's a little scary here. Dragonite's actually pretty decent into Amoonguss. Tusk EQ is solid in the endgame. I think I should probably be bringing AV Gambit here. I don't know, the top 4 are actually pretty strong. I think this is a matchup where you can probably argue for everything. I'm not sure Torkoal Lilligant's actually the strongest lead here. For example, something like Dragonite Gambit, Dragonite Flutter is intriguing, or even just Dragonite Tusk. I mean, Tusk is interesting because they actually don't have any resistances to ground, right? What's the logic in bringing Gambit? If they bring Arcanine, it punishes them pretty heavily and it walls Golden Go. Yeah, I actually think instead of Flutter, I should probably be bringing Tusk here. Alright, let's try this out. I think one of the things that I'm still getting used to while using this team is figuring out how to use Torkoal to set up the sum properly for Tusk and Flutter, because I think those damage calcs aren't as intuitive for me. But what's my general plan here? Like, I think Lilligant... I'm just laughing after coming off that last game because I missed almost every attack with it. But Sleep Powder is very good still, you know. Arcanine and Hands. Okay. Yeah, this is a good lead by them because even if I led Gambit and got a Defiant boost, Gambit doesn't have like a defensive Terra against... Well, I mean, I guess technically defensive Terra is fire, but it's not the most ideal. This is probably Goggles Arcanine if I had to guess. Could be Grass Terra on Hands as well. I do think double protecting turn 1 is fine. It does burn a turn of our Sun. I think the other consideration is that Tusk is actually really good against both of these right now. So if we expect like Fake Out into a slot, i.e. Fake Out Torkoal, I think switching Torkoal out into Tusk is pretty strong. I actually like that a little bit more. Switch out and protect here. Yeah. Because like now Tusk with Choice Scarf and Photosynthesis is enabled. I think the odds of them clicking Will-O-Wisp into that slot are really slim. And I think now Lilligant pressures Sleep Powder onto either slot going into next turn as well. And we can even Earthquake while Lilligant is out on the field, right? Next turn might just be a Ground Terra. Okay, Fake Out on Lilligant. Show me Flare Blitz in that slot as well, and I'd be very happy. Snarl's also perfectly fine. Great. Okay. Great Tusk is out to play. So here's the thing, they really have no switch-ins into Earthquake right now. I'm honestly pretty down to just Terra. Oh, this is Steel Terra, actually. We don't need to Terra. In fact, it's better for us to not Terra. So let's click Earthquake. I think the debate is what I want to do with the Lilligant slot. I could Leaf Storm into the hand slot. I could Sleep Powder into Arcanine if I think Arcanine's going to switch out right now. I could switch out as well, but I don't really have a great switch-in at the current moment. I think I'm down to Sleep Powder into the hand slot. They could defensively Terra Arcanine right now as well, but I think if you commit a defensive Terra right now, you obviously don't have it for the remainder of the game. So let's see who it's going to be. Okay, it's going to be hands going for Grass Terra. Yeah, that makes sense. Grass Terra and then Protect Arcanine here is probably their best option. Okay, they don't Protect. Nice. And so here's the thing about clicking Grass Terra on the hands, right? Like now you're weak to Eruption and fire type attacks in general from the Torkoal. I do end up critting myself, which is one of the downsides of attacking yourself, but it's fine. They actually go for Volt Switch. Okay, well that will not KO us. Perfect. Yeah, I mean, that one turn alone was huge, right? I got a knockout onto one of the Pokemon that's most problematic for Torkoal Lilligant, and I was able to force a Terror out from there, and then that Terror now works against them because of the Torkoal. The question is how we position Torkoal to a point where we can utilize it. So Palafin comes out, okay? It's not too much of a threat in its current form, but obviously it's going to want to pivot out and come back in. Hands comes back out. This could be a Ghost Terra Lilligant, honestly. Like, Palafin here should consider protecting, in my opinion. Or switching out. I think I'm actually down to switch into Torkoal here and protect, but my opponent could go for... I don't think you're going to Volt Switch Tusk, though. But what they could do is switch Palafin out and then Volt Switch with the hands to pivot back in, essentially. I could also consider Ghost Terra here, Sleep Powder into Palafin, or Leaf Storm into it, but I think I'm okay going for Protect and then bringing Torkoal back out. Because I think if they end up switching Palafin out, and Hand stays out on the field, and it's Assault Vest, next turn it's just Fire Terra after your Eruption, potential double KO. Yeah, Pally switches. What's Ramaluna? Roaring Moon. Okay, makes sense. Photosynthesis, sure. Speed, okay. Yeah, unless it's Volt Switch into Torkoal here, I think we're really well positioned going into next turn. Okay, let's fake out into that slot, that's fine. Fire Terra now, Eruption. Do I want to click after you? I hate the idea of clicking Sleep Powder here. I've got Gambit plus Tusk in the back. Sun is slowly expiring. If I were my opponent, like, you could consider Protect here. You could consider Tailwinding, Acrobatics. I think Hands could switch out into Palafin right now. I actually do think Sleep Powder is the better play here. Yeah, they switched. That makes sense. So Palafin gets to pivot back out. Was there a better Terra for me in this game is the question. I don't think Tusk Terra changes too much. I mean, I think they could be acrobatics, obviously, so Steel Terra would help against that. Actually, yeah, Steel Terra Tusk isn't that bad, I think. Fire Terra Torkoal. Oh my gosh. This team is not for me, man. Alright. Still so much damage from Eruption though. Wow, nice. Okay. Let's figure out how to win even with all the misses. Got Tailwind up. Lilligant should actually outspeed Palafin right now. They have hands in the back. Sun is expiring, though, which I think I have to really be careful about. I think here I'm interested in switching Torkoal out in a Gambit and then protecting Lilligant. That's the thing with this team, though, right? Like, jokes aside about the misses, like, even with that miss, I'm honestly still in pretty good shape. And if that miss didn't happen, I'd be in even better shape, right? Like, you want to be careful about when you click Sleep Powder and either click it when you feel like it can give you a huge lead or missing wouldn't, like, you know, be the end of the world. That last game, though, I think it was a little bit more crucial to hit the attacks just because Dondozo in general is not exactly the... I mean, it's kind of a scary matchup, I would say. They end up wave crashing a Gambit, but in the Sun, that's fine. You actually end up taking a lot of recoil. So Sunlight fades. What's important here is kind of thinking about the sequencing. Yeah, so their booster energy. And what I mean by sequencing... do you have Earthquake is my question. I didn't expect it. Is Torkoal, it's really important to conserve Torkoal for the Iron Hands that my opponent has in the back, right? Because that's actually basically the best thing to use to beat it. At this point, I feel like Lilligant has honestly done its job. The question is whether or not I have value in switching it out right now into, say, Great Tusk. There's 2 turns of Tailwind left. Okay, I'm going to Sleep Powder and Sucker here, I think. Okay, Palafin switches. That makes sense. Into hands. So Sucker fails. Good switch on their end. Probably an Acro here. Yeah. That's okay. That's okay. I get Torkoal out now. I guess the downside is I have committed the Fire Terra onto a Torkoal, so I can't Terra King Gambit defensively. I don't know. I think here I'm actually down to just Iron Head. It's the last turn of Tailwind on their end. Iron Head and click Flamethrower. I don't know. Like, the debate is whether or not I should consider switching out King Gambit right now, I think. Because they could obviously just Drain Punch into the slot, but I think Fake Out into Torkoal is the more likely outcome right now. I'm gonna Iron Head Flamethrower. Okay, they went for Acrobatics, which makes me think they're gonna click Drain Punch on a Gambit, yeah. This is gonna be a really close finish. I wonder if clicking Eruption there would have actually just won me the game. I don't think it would have KO'd the Roaring Moon though, right? Ugh. Just fall short of the KO. Tailwind Peter's out. I get Scarf Tusk out now though. Okay. So we've got the attack boost. They can Acrobatics into me. I mean, the question is whether or not that's a one-hit knockout. The other question is what move to lock myself into. I think I'm going to go Rock Slide plus Flamethrower here. Actually, maybe Eruption is better, because I could see them switching back out into Palafin. Oh, they just Tailwind. Okay, I think this wins the game if I don't miss Rock Slide then. Because this should be a double knockout. And if you end up clicking Wave Crash, you take a ton of recoil. I don't know. Like, maybe Close Combat Flamethrower also could have done it for me there, potentially. Okay. So, their last Pokemon is Palafin, transformed. No Terror on their end. Sun is still up. Palafin's pretty low at this point. Yeah. And there's 3 turns of Sun, so like Rock Slide plus Flamethrower here, I think is okay. Yeah, they just end up Wave Crashing. You take enough recoil where the Flamethrower should finish you off, and we survive. Cool. That was really stressful, mainly because, yeah, we obviously missed a pretty key Sleep Powder. I am like... my accuracy with Lilligant is so low in this game. I end up missing Rock Slide as well, but it's fine. Flamethrower end up finishing the Palafin. Yeah, I figured with the Sun up, Palafin could not win in this endgame. I thought they had a better shot of just, you know, maybe trying to go for Acrobatics on Tusk immediately. I didn't know what the damage roll on that would be, though. But, yeah, because they didn't. And we had Choice Scarf, you know, just outspeed the hands anyway, get the knockout onto that, get the double KO. So, the amount of spread-type damage that this team obviously has is very, very incredible. But, yeah, this is why, like... You have to be really careful when using Torkoal Lilligant, right? Like, don't click Sleep Powder unless you really feel like you have to, or you can get a big lead from it. And in the previous game, I really felt like I had to, right, against the Flutter. And then in this game, I felt like it was just my best play. Like, there wasn't really too much else to go for, so might as well, right? And if we hit that, we're honestly in a really, really good spot. But even with the miss, still able to win. So if you're using this team, once again, you have to accept you are going to miss a lot with Lilligant. This Pokemon's accuracy is just not the highest, right? Sleep Powder and Leaf Storm both can miss. Part of what's important is kind of understanding that's part of the component of utilizing the team, and then trying not to tilt when you do miss, right? And yeah, you know, I'm still thinking about that second game. Like, there were 2 big turns that I think I could have played better in. So even with the misses, I still think I didn't play perfectly, right? And at the end of the day, like, yeah, misses are a part of the game. Kind of have to accept it, and you should always just try to find ways to keep improving your play, even if you're getting unlucky. So yeah. Okay, we've got the Bundle Tusk, Talon, Tyranitar, Gothitelle, and Talonflame team that was really good at the first couple regional championships. So, like, the main thing that's scary about this is the Tyranitar, right? Especially because of its ability to, like, Flying Terra. I generally like leading Flutter into this matchup because I can go for, like, I could switch out with it. I actually think leading Lilligant's interesting because you can Ghost Terra to avoid Fake Out and Pressure Sleep Powder on turn 1. Seems kind of weird, but I actually think it makes some sense. Yeah, because I think a single Sleep Powder is actually game-defining in this matchup, and also I think Leaf Storming into Bundle and Tusk are also really strong. So I'm going to go Flutter Lilligant lead, Torkoal in the back, and then for the last one, don't love Dragonite here, although it's decent into Tusk. Gambit's good into Goth plus Tyranitar plus Bundle. It should probably be Gambit. I think Tusk is also, you can make an argument for. But yeah, let's see. Yeah, what's our goal here? I think the strategy is to ideally eliminate Tyranitar early or kind of neutralize it and then go from there. But they go for Talonflame plus Gothitelle. Oh, that's an interesting lead. Okay. They might just Brave Bird me, but I could switch like Lilligant out. No, I can't switch Lilligant out right now. Do I want to commit my Terra this early? It doesn't feel great to do that, but it actually might be pretty crucial to dodge a Fake Out from this. Yeah, because like what I can do is Shadow Ball into Talonflame, Terra, and then Sleep Powder to neutralize the Gothitelle slot. I'm worried about the Talonflame item. Like if it's more offensive Talonflame with Sharp Beak or Life Orb and it has max attack investment or considers a Flying Terra and goes for Brave Bird onto me, that would be pretty bad. But yeah, I was anticipating not this lead. Okay, they go for Fake Out onto us. Good. Taunt? Wow. Okay. I'm surprised the taunt went into that slot and not the other slot, because, yeah, this is like a complete disaster for them on turn 1, I think, if Sleep Powder hits. I wonder what the logic behind taunting Flutter was. Maybe preventing fear of the Flutter having Trick Room, which is fair. But, yeah, with Gothitelle now asleep and both of my Pokemon being able to switch out, I think we're decently well positioned. So Tyranitar comes out. I think the main thing that's interesting about this position is I'm going to switch into Torkoal. I honestly want to just go for Leaf Storm here. Mainly because it's higher accuracy than Tyranitar. Sorry, higher accuracy than Sleep Powder. Although you wouldn't think that throughout the course of this episode. But the idea is, like, even if you're Assault Vest, like, if you don't Terra here immediately, Leaf Storm does a ton, and I can just go for, like, After You Eruption next turn. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, God stays asleep. They might be clicking Crunch here as well, but it's just Rock Slide, yeah. Well, it actually was a little more to Torkoal than I would have liked. Maybe it's better to just Leaf Storm here. I'm not sure After You Eruption actually gets that KO. See, the thing is, they could Flying Terra Tyranitar right now, right? And click Rock Slide. So that's, like, the main thing to watch out for. You know, I would think Flamethrower actually gets the KO here. So I'm going to go After You plus Flamethrower. If they Terra, fine. They don't Terra. I still think this gets the KO with Sun being up and Charcoal. Nice. Okay. Well, that was a crit. I don't know. I feel like that gets the KO, but I don't know if they're like super specially defensive and bulky, maybe. Gothitelle wakes up, goes for Psychic onto Torkoal. See if that KOs us. Nice, we survive. Yeah, so I wonder if they were trying to deny like a Trick Room on turn 1, because I was kind of surprised by that. Tusk is their last one. Attack boost. How many turns of Sun are left? 3? I'm honestly fine double protecting here, because I think now is the position for them to go for a Terra, or, you know, go for a Protect with Tusk, for example. I think switching Lilligant out was also potentially appropriate, right? Like, what's interesting about this match was using Lilligant offensively with Leaf Storm. It was really valuable into Tyranitar to deal 70%. It's good into Tusk as well here. Yeah, we bait out the Protect. Good. Given that I have Gambit as my final Pokemon, I think to avoid misses with the Lilligant, I can just go After You Flamethrower now into the Tusk slot. That's interesting. They went for Trick Room. Okay. Well, I don't need to After You then. Because we have King Gambit in the back, by the way, Gambit just kind of wins this endgame if I get damage onto this. So, I'm happy to just Flamethrower into the Tusk slot right now. 2 turns of Sunlight. I actually think it's worth switching Lilligant out into Flutter right now, because Flutter is completely useless under Trick Room, right? But Lilligant, after the Sun is over, yeah, it just applies a little bit more pressure. But I think realistically, King Gambit should win this endgame for me already at this point. Yeah, like getting this Flamethrower off alone, I think should put us in a winning spot. Especially if they're Life Orb here. Oh, they're sashed. Okay. Yep. So they'll get a double KO here, presumably, but now I just bring out King Gambit, and one of the beautiful things about King Gambit is that it completely walls Gothitelle. So there's Headlong Rush. Yep. Now I just bring out Gambit. I think their best bet is if they had Thunder Wave on Gothitelle, you have to go for the T-Wave and just hope for multiple paralysis. Because otherwise Gambit just walls completely. And without Thunder Wave, then the game is definitely over, I think. We've seen, what, Fake Out, Trick Room, Psychic. So I'll go for Sucker Punch here. And 3 turns of Trick Room. Sucker into you. Sleep Powder into you. Yeah. Should be pretty locked up, I think. I think the main thing was when you go Talon and Gothitelle, it's fairly passive, and yeah, like and they go for a Terra finally. Okay. There's no Terra that really helps against Sucker Punch here, though, on Tusk. It's going to be Terra on Gothitelle into Steel? Okay. Normal. Okay. Normal makes sense, by the way, so that you are immune to Ghost-type attacks from, like, Golden Go, for example. Stay Protect. Fail Sucker Punch, but that's fine. Yeah, they just go for Psychic. If you're just clicking Psychic there, I think the game is over. And we missed Sleep Powder. But we didn't really need to hit there. It's fine. Sunlight fades. I'm just going to go for Iron Head here and Protect. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like if you're clicking Psychic there, then you don't have an appropriate response in a King Gambit, right? Yeah, they go for the double. Makes sense. And that's what Gambit does really well into Gothitelle. If you bring it out against Gothitelle, right, like, the Gothitelle just can't really do anything into it. So, Iron Head gets the KO here. I think them setting up Trick Room kind of worked against their favor, but I guess if they didn't set up Trick Room, I would have just gone after you, plus Flamethrower onto the Tusk. And essentially in this game, we made the Gothitelle relatively useless because I had 2 Ghost types, so I could switch out pretty easily, which was a big deal, right? But I'm honestly really glad to have had so many misses throughout the course of this episode because it highlights that you cannot rely on Lilligant hitting its attacks consistently, right? It can be amazing if you hit those Sleep Powders, but yeah, like, it is often going to miss, and you have to accept that reality when you utilize this team. Anyway, now it's a Gambit versus Gothitelle 1v1. This game would have been pretty, well, I was going to say pretty different, I guess, if they taunted into the Lilligant on turn 1, but I don't think the Sleep Powder onto Gothitelle actually really changed that much. You know, if I had to guess, maybe they wanted to set up Trick Room and they wanted to taunt into potential Imprison from my Gothitelle. Right? Like, their logic might have been, hey, if I, like, prevent you from imprisoning, I get Trick Room up, then I get Tyranitar under Trick Room, and then I'm in a really good spot. So that's my best guess for what they were going for on turn 1. Like, yeah, wanting to play a very Trick Room-oriented game with Gothitelle and Tyranitar. But Ghost Terror here, interesting, not only to avoid that fake out on turn 1, but also to potentially switch out a Gothitelle Shadow Tag. So, yeah. Anyway, that's going to be it for this one. Very interesting set of games. Obviously, in that one loss, I think, you know, we got pretty unlucky, but I'm not thinking about the luck as much as how I could have played better, right? Like, I didn't even talk about turn 1. I could have gone for Ghost Terra with Lilligant. Now, I don't regret not going for Ghost Terra there, mainly because I felt like it was really obvious, but yeah, I guess, like, Ghost Terra, Sleep Powder onto Dozo would have punished them really heavily as well. So there were multiple turns I could have played better in that game. So even with the misses, yeah, I feel like it was more on me to have not put myself in the best position to win that game. So yeah. Anyway, that's going to be it for this one. So hopefully if you try out this team, you have better luck hitting your Sleep Powders and Leaf Storms. I am blessing you all who are watching this video. And even with the misses, like, the team is incredibly powerful. It's just one of the strongest teams that exists in the format, and obviously had a very dominant victory at the most recent regionals in Vancouver, but also top 4 at Knoxville by the initial creator Nails as well. So thanks for watching. Leave a like if you enjoy, and I'll see you all next time. All right. Peace.